So can everybody see my screen now? It should be the 2022 Canada Games selection criteria.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
up.
Great. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to kind of start going through the document item by item and just kind of give a little bit of info about each or possible clarification about any of the points. The first full screen, I believe it should be full screen. So it must be something on your end if you're not seeing this, seeing the document at full screen. So first are the selection standards. So for 2022, there's no change to them from 2021.
John, if you're not seeing it as full screen, go to view in the top right corner and select standard, and that should do it.
Not working in there. So. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry.
It's all good. So as I was mentioning, the 2022 standards are exactly the same as what the 2021 standards were supposed to be. As we all know, COVID has kind of pushed the games ahead a year, but there was no reason to make any changes. There are no reason to make any changes based on there was no extra data kind of to add to these standards. So a little bit about how they're derived, because that's usually a question as well. So the A standard, which is kind of the main standard that the team is selected from, is the average of 8th place over the past 3 Canada Games. So on average, that A standard is typically, what the level that you would need to perform at to place in 8th place at a Canada Games. The A plus standard is also averaged over 3 Canada Games, but it's a 5th place finish. So that's usually a question that we usually get, is where did these come from, and kind of how did you come up with those? You'll notice that there are a couple of equivalency standards, just because so the hurdles and the throws. So if I remember correctly, the hurdle standard was we just looked at a number of athletes that competed both over 42 and 39 hurdles, and kind of looked at the differential on average of what was happening there. So that's kind of how that one was derived. And then the throws ones are a little bit easier, because you can use a pretty concrete formula that you can use to convert between implements. But for the most part, those don't end up becoming a factor in team selection anyway. So for Special Olympics and Para, we don't publish team standards per se, just because those, both Para and Special Olympics, the groups tend to, well, for starters, we don't have as much data, that's one of them. And so the selection for both of those groups are, there's more input from the Canada Games coaches in determining, who are the appropriate athletes to select for those groups. So the actual criteria points, like I said, we'll quickly kind of go through each of them. The first one just, it simply says that all competitors must meet the requirements within the actual Canada Game, the overarching Canada Games technical package. That's not something that most people would need to be, that you would really need to be concerned about. I mean, the big one, you would need to be a Canadian citizen, but not one that you need to worry about too much. Number 2, athletes need to be an Athletics Nova Scotia member on the day the performance is achieved, that in order for it to be considered for selection. So the only caveat to that is the NSAF championships, in which we allow a 10-day kind of leeway there for those results to count. Because inevitably there are a number of athletes that that may be new to the sport, maybe usually because they're new to the sport, so they may have kind of came out of nowhere and competed exceptionally well and may not have been aware of that Athletics Nova Scotia even exists. So there is a little bit of leeway there for those athletes, but for all intents and purposes, you do need to be a member in order for your performance to count or to be considered for selection, I should say. Number 3, just that all performances for events must be attained at a sanctioned meet. So whether that's our meet or one in New Brunswick or Ontario or wherever, it does need to be a sanctioned meet. And if it's the results need to be available, essentially, is all this last point is kind of saying. So this day and age, that's not as much of a concern as it was maybe 3 or 4 Canada Games cycles ago, when sometimes results don't make their way to the internet, but that's not really the case anymore. Point 4, athletes are required to compete at a minimum of 2 sanctioned meets. So the trials are actually one of these meets. So, just to meet this criteria or meet this point, then all an athlete really needs to do is compete in one additional meet besides the trials in order to be eligible for the team. So the start of the qualifying period will be March 1st, which is the same as it's always been. So on March 1st, 2022, I guess 2.5 months from now, that will be the start of the qualification period. And in bold, you can see that it's only outdoor performances that are eligible for consideration. Point number 6. So this just talks about the age requirements. So as most of you are probably aware, with Canada Games being pushed ahead a year, the age got pushed ahead a year as well, which means that anybody who was eligible for Canada Games in 2021 is eligible for Canada Games in 2022. So essentially on the able-bodied side, that means anyone born in 1998 or later, anyone para-athlete born in 86 or later, and any Special Olympic athlete born in 91 or later. As with most provincial teams and most things like this, athletes will be required to provide proof of age, which would take place usually with your application at the conclusion of the selection meet. Item number 7 is it essentially just says that you need to apply to the team. So you need to express interest in being considered for selection to the team. I'm just seeing a couple of questions here as we go along. So there's one about can the document be shared? So I see Rich just posted it. So it's been on our website for it may have been off for a short period of time when our website was being updated, but it's been posted for a couple of years now on our website. Sorry. Item number 8. So students from outside Nova Scotia are attending school on a full-time basis in Nova Scotia may apply to compete for Team Nova Scotia. So this is there's always usually a question or two around this. So that means that any athlete, let's say that you're from Ontario, but you're a full-time student at St. FX, then you are eligible to try out for the athletics or for the Nova Scotia Canada Games team. That's the way it's always been. That's a Canada Games Council item that allow that. The one thing you cannot do is you can't try out for more than one Canada Games team. So you essentially need to make a choice that of which one you're gonna vie to be selected for. Item number 9, so just indicates that all athletes must compete at the selection meet with the following exceptions. So if you're competing, if you're an athlete competing on an Athletics Canada designated national team, then that would be an exemption. If there's a death in your immediate family, or number 3, if an athlete has achieved the A+ performance standard, which you saw at the very beginning of the participation. So by achieving that standard, it's still an expectation that you attend the trials, but let's say that you're an athlete that trains in British Columbia and you remain there throughout the summer months training, and you have achieved the A+ standard, that you could that would mean that it's probably not fair for us to make you travel across the country for the trials meet in that situation. So it really is for extraordinary circumstances like that. But the intention is that even if you have the A+ standard, the expectation is that you're still there, but you can, in those circumstances, then you are able to ask for exemption from the trials meet.
Can I jump in for 1 second on that, just for a clarification point?
Sure.
Being exempted from the trials, while it's probably a 99% chance that means you're making the team, that is not a guaranteed spot on the team, if I'm not mistaken. I'm thinking of two events in particular, but I'm sure there's more, like women's javelin, men's 1500 are 2 events that I can see 3 or more people having the A+ standard. If you have been granted an exemption from the trials because you have the A+ standard and you don't come to the trials, and 2 people run faster than you have or perform, have a better performance than you had, the top 2 from the trials with the top 2 performances will be going. The exemption is not you are on the Canada Games team. It's you don't have to come to the trials.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because that applies to any of those 3 categories. Whether it's category 1, 2, or 3. Just because you exempt doesn't mean that you have been named to the team. 10's a pretty standard one, just that athletes must remain competition ready. That's something that you'll see in pretty much every team selection, just that you are expected that when if you suffer a really bad injury the week after trials, then the expectation is that you would let your coaching staff know, and because the expectation is that you are ready and able to compete at the games. Just kind of very quickly going through the team composition. So I guess for starters, all of these team composition items they're not Athletics Nova Scotia items. They're just Canada Games Council items. These are the limits. These are the minimums and maximums in each of the events or for our sports. So first, maximum of 2 athletes per event can be selected. So as Rich mentioned before, there will be events where we will have 2, 3, 4 people that have met the team standard in one particular event, but unfortunately we're only able to select 2 of them, and that's a Canada Games Council thing. It's not an Athletics Nova Scotia item. Secondly, a maximum of 4 athletes per relay team will be selected to the team. So that goes for the 4x1 and the 4x4 relay teams. So it is possible to be selected to the 4x1 or the 4x4 relay team. The final positions for the relay team will be decided at the games and is under the discretion of the respective relay coach and the head coach. So the total number of athletes, so we can have up to 61 athletes on the team, comprised of 50 able-bodied athletes, 5 para wheelchair athletes, 2 para throws athletes, and 4 Special Olympic athletes. And then breaking that down a little bit further, I guess on the able-bodied side, we can only take a maximum of 27 male or 27 female athletes. So there have been years in the past where that has been a limiting factor as well, that we just purely run out of spots for that particular gender. And again, these are all Canada Games Council items, not Athletics Nova Scotia items. So the actual selection process, we'll go through kind of each category of selection. So each athlete will be placed in one of 6 selection groups, which we'll talk about in a moment. The event application order will be determined by 2 factors. So if you're in group 1, your application is looked at before anybody who's in group 2, which is looked at before anyone who's in group 3, and so on and so on. So athletes in those higher number groups are looked at first and selected to the team in that order. So within those groups, all event applicants, will be looking at where the athlete's performance is relative to the team standard. So in many cases, that'll be over standard. That'll be plus. This formula will give a plus percentage, or if you're off standard, then we would have, everybody would be ranked, if you're 1% off, 2% off, 3% off, or whatever the case may be. So the first order is that number, the selection group number, and then within that group, you're ordered by your percentage, either above or below standard. The selection committee is comprised of the Athletics Nova Scotia chair, the executive director, the technical director, the athlete representative, and an active member of Athletics Nova Scotia. So it, in some ways, I don't like the term selection committee, because that kind of implies that this committee is selecting the team. In reality, this document that we're going through and these points that we're talking through tonight are selecting the team. Really, the job of this selection committee is just to kind of make sure that that we did our job in following this criteria and trying to make sure that there were no mistakes made, and all of the data is correct and so on. So it's more of oversight committee than it is a selection committee in my mind. So for each event, the committee would look at, has the event been filled? Because we talked about we can only have two per event. Is the gender capacity been filled? Has the team actually been filled? So those would be the items that the selection committee would be making sure that we're kind of following our own rules, essentially. So each event application can only qualify an athlete for a specific event in the event application. So the following exceptions apply for selection to a relay team. So as we noted before, you you can be selected to a relay team and not necessarily an individual event. So, and that would be up to a maximum of 4 athletes in either the 100 or the 400 meters. There's just a quick note here about if there happen to be reports of past or present that Athletics Nova Scotia is aware of that may be a factor in team selection. Hugely not an issue, but it's something good to have in there nonetheless. So the actual selection groups. So we'll go through the 6 selection groups that we talked about earlier, and they are pretty straightforward, so we won't spend a ton of time on them. So the first group is comprised of all of those exemptions, essentially, that we talked about earlier. So athletes that may be away traveling on a national team, for instance, or have been granted exemption because they have A+ standard and they're at a training camp in Europe. So this group, group 1, is typically a very small group. So there'll be a handful of athletes in this group at best. Group 2 is comprised of all applications who won their event at the trials meet and have achieved the team standard with a fully legal performance. So, if it's a track event, that means, 2.0 meters per second. The third group are those athletes who place second at trials and also have the team standard with a legal wind rating. And then groups 4 and groups 5 are kind of duplicates of groups 2 and 3, with the only exception is that we give a little bit of leniency if an athlete has achieved a performance with a wind rating somewhere between 2.1 and 3 meters per second. So technically it is an illegal performance. However, there have been situations in the past where, based on our climate, based on just the way the cookie kind of crumbled that year, that there several athletes would struggle to even have a valid performance. So, this provides a little bit of leeway, in those circumstances where, where an athlete competed all year and has had 2.1s and 2.2s for the entire season. The 6th group, so this is where most athletes fall. So the 6th and final group is all the other applicants. So, essentially, if you haven't, if you're not exempt from trials, or if you haven't become first or second at trials and have the team standard, then you're in group 6. So then as we talked about earlier, within group 6, then everybody's ranked in their percentage away from the team standard, and then at the team, the remaining spots on the team after we go through the first 5 groups get filled with athletes in group 6 based on their percentage away from the team standard. This just the appeals process. So an athlete or coach, parent, whoever can appeal in writing within 24 hours of the team selection being announced. Just a quick note on that it must be a valid appeal. And what I mean by that, you can't appeal the selection criteria because you're all seeing it right now and it's been posted for a very long time. So that wouldn't be considered a valid appeal. Really, the only valid appeal is if the selection committee made a mistake in applying the criteria. So that's I'm sure there may be other circumstances, but that's really kind of the when it comes down to it, that's really the only possible valid appeal. So that if that happens and it is a valid appeal, then that would go to an appeals committee, and then the appeals committee would review and make a decision within 48 hours, and then that decision would be final at that point. And as noted here in point 2, the athlete or designate would also have the opportunity to meet with the appeals committee if they felt that was necessary.
And what will typically happen is, of the 61 team members, the initial team release will release 59 names, so that we're not, if an appeal is successful, you're not removing somebody who's been named. There's those last few names get named after the appeals period has passed.
Yeah, that happens quite a bit, actually. That it's somebody that was going to get named in those last couple spots, and then they end up submitting an appeal. So that kind of concludes kind of going through the selection criteria. And I'm not sure if Rich, you had anything to add before kind of opening it up to question and answer.
Yeah, there's a couple things. I mean, first of all, Ian, I'll let John answer that. I believe that NCAA meets would be considered Athletics Canada sanctioned meets, so I don't know why.
Yeah, there's no issue there. Yeah,
okay.
It's really any legitimate meet. It's the only issue you really would run into there is if you host a meet in your backyard and you're trying to say that that you competed at the Rich Lehman Open. I don't know.
Really good results at that one. And from a team selection and logistics standpoint, I just have 2 things to talk about that come up. I was gonna say every year, but every 4 years. It's something that tends to come up all the time. I know it's in the criteria, but I just want to be very clear about relay selection. There are there's 2 spots per individual event, and then there are 4 spots awarded for relay members. Being named to the team to run the 4x1 or the 4x4 is not a guarantee that you will be running the final of those events. It's not a guarantee that you'll be running at all, but it's all but guaranteed you will be. Once we're there at the games, especially when it comes to the finals, those decisions are going to be made by our relay coaches, which for the 4x1 will be John Knoll and Heather Beaton, and for the 4x4 will be Tori Grimshaw and Heather Beaton. I'll break ties if I have to, but I'm going to, those coaches are going to be the ones who are most familiar with their event groups. Those 2 spots, in some cases, will run both rounds. And in some cases, they may run the first round. I'm looking at the 4x4 where the schedule has the 800 heats and the 4x4 heats basically back to back. We're not going to ask an 800 runner to run an 8 and then jump right back on the track and run the heats of the 4x4. We'll put the 4x4 people in. But if Heather and Tori are confident that our 800 runner is a faster 400 runner than the 4th 4x4 runner, we're going with the fastest team. I think that's in the document, but it's something that comes up time after time. And the other one, every year, and I as a coach of athletes who have tried to make this team, this is the one that always gets us. The 2 sanctioned meets, just make sure you do 2. Don't finish the Canada Games. We had people in 2017 who had to drive to Moncton to compete there to get a second one in before our window closed, which was the end of our meet. So those are 2 that get missed a lot.
A couple of questions here that are coming in. So one about are athletes able to participate in more than one sport for Team Nova Scotia? To be honest, I think I would have to ask the province about that. You know, if they're separate weeks, I don't think it would be an issue at all. If it's in the same week, I feel like that will probably be an issue. But that's actually Tracy is on the line, our team manager. Would that be something? Maybe I'm gonna pass that one off to Tracy to see if she can find an answer to that one for you. I don't think I've encountered that one before, so I don't. Like I said, I don't want to give you an answer without definitively knowing.
John,
Yeah.
it's always been before, but I'll check on it. It's always been if it's different weeks, then you can attend multiple sports, but if it's same week, you cannot.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, but I like I said, I don't want to say that definitively without
I'll check
asking
in
the
on it.
questions first.
Right.
Perfect.
That's what it's always been before, but I will check on it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Question from Joy: what would be the COVID rules for Canada Games? That's something that we don't have any information on yet, and I'm not even sure if Canada Games. I'm sure they don't have their protocols nailed down at this point, just because things are still changing, believe it or not. So I'm sure there will be a lot of information about that coming, but that just isn't available currently. Question about Canadian citizenship. So you either need to be eligible, you need to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. So either are acceptable. Hopefully that answers your question. I don't think I mentioned the permanent residency earlier in the presentation, but that does meet the eligibility requirement. Tentative trials info available? Yes. So the trials are scheduled for July 7th and 9th, or 8th and 9th. 9th and 10th. 9th and 10th, sorry. So it's that weekend, July 9th and 10th. We don't have a location yet, but that will be the date, and obviously somewhere in Nova Scotia. With 27 able-bodied male or female athletes, there could be times when having 2 spots filled for each event surpasses that. What is the process to determine which event is not? So if I'm reading your question properly, or understanding it correctly, then it comes down to your percentage away from standard. So as I noted, the majority of athletes are in that group 6, or in that selection category 6. So the team gets filled going down the list within that category, which is not event specific at all. It's purely how far away you are from standard. So you may have, we'll have people with 1.49%, 1.5%, 1.51%, and so on. So it gets filled that way. And then once the gender capacity is reached, then unfortunately we're just not able to select any more off that gender. What I can say is we wouldn't be in a situation where we wouldn't be taking someone with team standard that was top 2 in their event group. So that there'll definitely be enough spaces for that, because on average, It's a little bit different this year because the age is a little bit different, but on average, we would have about half of the team make the team standard, and then the rest of the team being filled on percentage off standard. So this year is a little bit different because it is a little bit older, but also it's been a very different last couple of years as well. So my guess is it would be probably pretty similar. Do results in NCAA count towards achieving standard? Yes, absolutely. I see Rich posted trials. More trials. How do you submit meet results to be verified if they're from NCAA? As long as they're posted online, which they're definitely going to be, I mean, just on the application that you submit, the actual team application, it'll ask where the performance was achieved. So just indicate the meet name and date, and there'll be no issue whatsoever because every single result is verified anyway. So as long as the meet name and the date is there, then there won't be any issue at all with that. We have any other questions out there? Yeah, it's the whole criteria is pretty straightforward. Usually all of the questions that arise usually in the days before trials are usually because the criteria hasn't been read through. But if you actually read through it, then I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it's fair. It's pretty much the same as what we've been using for quite some time, and a lot of similarities to their Legion criteria as well. And above all, I feel that it's very objective. I don't see any other. Oh, there's a couple more questions here. If you're competing in the United States and training in the States, you still need 2 meets in Nova Scotia. No, or would you get an exemption? So no, it's not 2 meets in Nova Scotia. It's just 2 sanctioned meets. So, you could be, whether it's in the United States or Ontario or whatever, it's really just that you're actively competing to a degree. I mean, 2 meets is obviously not very much, but it's more, they could be anywhere. They don't need to be in Nova Scotia. Oh, and Rich just want to field all questions apparently.
Well, after tonight.
When is the A+ exemption application due? In the past, we had asked for 2 weeks before. I don't know. I'm just going to pull up the criteria again here to see if we actually have anything in there. Can't even find it now. Yeah, so there's no date listed. Like I said, in the past, we had asked for 2 weeks in advance. That's something I'll probably going to leave with Rich if he wants to have a firm date on that.
We'll say 2 weeks, and I'll chat with Anitra. I'm not sure if she's on the call, but I'll chat with Anitra and make sure that gets updated on the criteria, but 2 weeks is plenty.
I don't see anything else coming in. Rich, do you have anything final to add before?
I do, and you're not going to like it. with the indoor open being canceled, I think this is probably Jonathan's last official thing that he's doing with other people around, at least for Athletics Nova Scotia. So I just want to take a quick opportunity to thank John for everything he's done for the sport. I think almost everybody here has had some interaction with him, but I don't think anybody, including myself, probably have a full understanding of everything that he did. I shared a very small office with him for a year, doing things from coaching courses. Like my first coaching course was taught by John, to running meets, to club development, to literally coaching. I would, 10 years ago, he was, being asked by Athletics Canada if he could please come to national team events to coach the throws, without even applying. He's done so much for our sport in this province, and I think it would, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that, and we won't have the opportunity to do it this weekend at the meet. So thank you, John, on behalf of the membership that has like quadrupled since you started at Athletics Nova Scotia.
Oh, thank you very much, Rich. I definitely appreciate that. I'm not sure I deserve it all, but I definitely appreciate it. And yeah, it's been a good ride, that's for sure. And just time for a new adventure. My last day is actually tomorrow, so this is really my last official kind of duty. Great. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Like I said, 53 people on the call. I mean, Rich and I have done a number of Zoom sessions over the past, 4 or 5 years or so. And I think previous to this one, the record was 13 or 14. So,
we cracked double digits once.
Yeah, so it's
something happens,
yeah.
then she goes into the hospital.
John, I think it's people were just because this might be the last time that they get to see your beautiful face and your lovely intellect. So they're just making sure that we hear the final John end the game spiel.
That must be it. It has nothing to do with people interested in Canada games.
No, actually, most of these people don't even care. It's just all about you. It's all about you, bud.
Great. All right. Well, yeah, again, thanks again. And, moving forward, if there's, at least for the time being, as Rich kind of posted his email in there. So if there's any questions, probably after tomorrow, I guess, then Rich is probably the person to contact, and he'll definitely be able to help you out. And if, I guess before contacting Rich, I would kind of urge you to go back to the criteria and just kind of give it a quick read through, because 9 times out of 10, usually that will probably answer your question. But if you still have questions, then Rich is definitely there to help you out. So great. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.